Well, let's bring you up to date with that breaking news in the last hour. That is that more than 10,000 people have now crossed the English Channel to the UK aboard small boats in 2021. That's according to the latest data compiled by the Press Association. Meanwhile, the Home Office confirmed that at least 482 people succeeded in crossing from essentially Calais, the northern French coast, to Dover yesterday. That is a new single records day.
Well, we're joined by GBNews' own Nigel Farage. Nigel, a new record for a single day. We only just set a new record not so long ago. I mean, is this going to stop anytime soon? We've already broken last year's record in July, and that was last year's record for the entirety of the year, which was over 8,000, 10,000 already just this year.
Well, I'm pleased to say for GB News viewers, if they watched my show at 7 o'clock last night, they were told about this. I predicted it would be over 400. I said it would go through 10,000. And we've, as a channel, very much been ahead of this story. I'm going to repeat what I've said before. There will be in excess of 20,000 people that cross the channel this year. I suspect if we get a calm September, the number will be nearer 30,000 people. 90% of them will be young men under the age of 30, coming from countries all over the world. It was noticeable yesterday how many Vietnamese appeared to be within that number. So it's coming from the Far East, it's coming from Africa, they're coming from the Middle East, and there's no way this will stop, because as soon as they manage to launch that boat, once they're in the sea from the French beaches, even if it's 50 meters, they will then be escorted by the French Navy to the division line in the English Channel, where Border Force will pick them up, bring them into Dover, process them, and put them in a 4-star hotel. And on days when Border Force can't cope, they will call on the volunteer RNLI to do the job. And if you really think about it, Border Force isn't acting to protect our borders. Border Force is effectively now a safe boat taxi service, and the criminal gangs must just be laughing to themselves. They are now making many millions every single week, and it doesn't matter what Priti Patel says, and she can stand up at the Tory party conference and give a tough speech and say, they're all criminals, we're going to put them all in prison, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But as long as people know that as long as you get over that line into British territory, you'll be taken in, given dental care, given medical care, given £38 a week spending money in a nice hotel to stay in, they'll keep coming. Of course, in the end, that wonderful vision of what Britain is will turn into something different, as so many of these people will finish up in the illegal economy, in the criminal economy. Many would effectively finish up as modern-day slaves in our country. So the whole process, from start to finish, is shameful. And yes, 482 yesterday. Well, I'm going to predict now, you ain't seen nothing yet.
But Nigel, you pointed out there, didn't you, that people moving, trying to reach other countries is nothing new. It has always happened in our history. We move around as human beings, and where there's a will, there's a way. They'll always find a way of getting to this country. Many would say we need to get this into perspective, though. We get net migration figures into the hundreds of thousands in this country every year. Even 20,000 is a relatively small number.
Well, look, I think the point is this, that there is quite a big difference in the minds of ordinary people and voters between legal immigration, Darren, and illegal immigration. This is illegal immigration. Most of these people that come do not have any identity documents. They deliberately destroy them, so we've no idea who's coming. So not only is this putting a massive financial cost on our country, not only does it show that taking back control of our borders, the great Brexit promise, and part of why Boris got the big majority in 2019 means nothing. But I actually hope that it prompts a bigger debate about what's happening to the population of our country. When you look at it, at minimum 7 million rise in our population so far this century, probably near 8, to be honest, and 90% of it directly due to immigration. Now, of course, we can argue that there have been huge numbers of wonderful people that have come to this country, who do great work and all the rest of it. When you think about that level of demographic change and you realize why there's a housing crisis, there's a health crisis. We have a population crisis. So what is happening in the Channel, I think, will lead to a much bigger and I hope more sensible debate about numbers.
But people would say, actually, but it also should prompt a debate about our asylum system. We take far fewer asylum seekers than most of our comparable European neighbours. We don't have a kind of route in which people can legally seek asylum in this country that works, why many are forced to take and frankly put their lives at risk in these small boats. So initially, what we should be doing is working out a proper asylum system that reflects our goodwill in this country to help people out in need and maybe actually would mitigate what we're seeing in the Channel.
We don't need to take any lessons from our European neighbours. And let me use the proper word. The proper word is refugee. All right? We need no lessons from France or Germany or Italy or anybody else about this. We are the one country. You know, whether it was the Huguenots centuries ago, whether it was the Jews in a couple of waves, whether it was the Ugandan Asians, we don't need any lessons. We've always been very open and generous to people who really were refugees in the sense that they were in fear of their lives or their liberty because of who they were, and that can be their race or their religion or whatever it may be. The fact that Europe went mad in 2015 and said that anyone that crosses the Mediterranean and puts foot on European soil will be able to stay. The fact they've got this wrong actually is one of the reasons why we did vote Brexit. We saw those huge mistakes. So look, perfectly happy if there are people overseas through a centre that apply to be refugees, and we can look at that on a case-by-case basis. I am utterly convinced that the vast majority of these young men would not qualify as refugees under our traditional 1951 Geneva Convention. And even if they did, to have your borders open to people with no documentation coming in, some of whom were fighting in that Syrian war recently. I mean, there is a genuine question about our national security here too that needs to be addressed. But there's one other thing, and it's trust. Trust in our democratic system is important. Taking back control of our borders was the key reason Brexit passed in that referendum. Boris Johnson benefited hugely off the back of that, with by modern comparisons, a massive parliamentary majority. And what you're seeing now is when Conservative voters are polled, what is happening in the Channel is now one of the top 2 to 3 concerns of Conservative voters. And there is
Nigel,
a beginning
let me
of a
ask you
feeling that
this.
the truth's not being told.
Let me ask you this. So, it's all well and good, critiquing what Priti Patel is doing. Clearly, you're not impressed with her record so far. So if you were Home Secretary today, what's the first thing you'll be doing to curb this issue?
Oh, I've been saying this since 2019, Mercy. There is only one way you stop this, and the model for it, of course, came from Australia. They faced exactly the same problem. Boats coming from Indonesia, people illegally arriving in Australia, bigger boats, bigger distances, but the principle exactly the same. And Australian government struggled with this. They found no solutions. They thought about offshore processing centres. They couldn't get a solution until, when Tony Abbott was the PM, they put those boats under tow and they took them back to Indonesia. And he made clear that nobody that ever came to Australia illegally via that route, nobody would ever be allowed to claim refugee status and be allowed to stay. And guess what happened? The boats stopped coming. And as soon as we have the political will and the courage to take those boats back to France, which after all is a safe country, as soon as we do that, this will stop. But until we do it, it will go on and it will escalate. You see, it's actually worth paying the 5,000 euros, the 6,000 euros, whatever the traffickers demand. It's worth paying that money because you're virtually guaranteed to get into the United Kingdom and to be allowed to stay.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.